Alright, here's day 2 of solving equations with rationals. This is more of a review. Let's talk about coefficients really quick. Coefficients are numbers that are multiplied to variables, or with variables, excuse me. Here are a few examples. We'll start off with something obviously basic, like, let's go with 5a equals 65. Now it's a number that is multiplied with a variable. So 5a equals 65. This is 5 times a. So 5 is our coefficient. This is a relatively easy example. Now we're going to talk about the ones that are a little bit more complex. Now we've got 5 over 6 times y is equal to 30. Alright? 5 over 6 times y. Well, that in itself is telling you that 5 over 6 is the coefficient. Now technically this is 5 divided by 6 times y, but it doesn't matter. 5 over 6 is being multiplied with y. So this is our coefficient. We could take this another step farther, and we could include a variable in the numerator. And when there's a numerator, that means there's a denominator. So this is 2w over 7. This could also be read as 2 times w over 7. They're both correct. But in this case, the coefficient for this is 2 over 7. And remember, if you see a fraction, that means the coefficient can't just be the numerator in this particular example. When there's a numerator, there's got to be a denominator. Now I've got one more similar to this. C over 8 equals 15. Now remember, this is C over 8. 8 is the denominator. So clearly there's a fraction. 8 is the denominator. If you don't see the numerator, well, that only means it could be one number. That's 1c over 8, or 1 times c over 8. So that coefficient's 1 over 8. This last one is probably the most common in terms of difficulty, because we don't show the coefficient of 1. Don't forget, we never show the coefficient of 1, and we never show the exponent of 1. Now let's get into solving some of these. Don't forget your inverse operations. And one other word that we're going to want to use. Reciprocal, or the multiplicative inverse. So let's start off with 3x is equal to 81. So this is 3 times x, and the inverse of multiplying is dividing. So it's going to be 3 divided by the coefficient. Well, the coefficient is 3, so we're going to divide 3 by 3. You have a choice. Your x can go next to the numerator or next to the fraction. I tend to put it next to the fraction. Remember the golden rule of algebra. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. So 3 over 3 is 1. That leaves us with x. And then 81 divided by 3. And you can do this through long division, or you can do this through some sort of factorization. Okay, either way, x is going to be 27. I'm only going to do one more of those. One more of those, excuse me. Lost track where I was looking on my paper. Do something similar, but with a negative. Negative 5w is equal to negative 35. Okay, again, the coefficient's negative 5, so we're going to divide both sides by negative 5. This time I'm going to put the w up here just to show you that, it is versatile in placement. Negative 5 over negative 5 is 1. And don't forget that a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 35 divided by 5 is 7. It's really important that you show all your work. Now, let's talk about these. We've got 3/4 times x equals 1. Alright. Now, I did say 3/4 times x, so the inverse should be division. But anytime I see a fraction, I just go back to multiplying by the reciprocal, which is something that we've talked about in the past, many times in the past actually. So the reciprocal of 3 over 4 is 4/3. We're going to multiply them because they're multiplicative inverses. There's my x. And then I'm going to do 1 times 4/3. Now 3 over 3 is 1. 4 over 4 is 1, leaving us with x. And then anything times 1 is itself. This improper fraction is an acceptable answer. If you want to change it to mixed, go right ahead. Now let's do negative 1 over 6. X is equal to 30. So the coefficient's a negative 1 over 6. We're going to multiply by the reciprocal, which is negative 6 over 1. Don't forget that x. On this side we have 30 times negative 6. Remember, this is an improper fraction, but it's an improper fraction. It's a whole number. Negative 6 over negative 6 is positive 1. And negative 6 times 30, well, is a negative, because negative times positive. 6 times 3 is 18. 6 times 0 is 0. And there you go. Five over 30 times x equals 15. Now, take the time, every once in a while you might see a coefficient that might not be simplified. Most of the time they will be, but you just have to be aware that you can be thrown any type of problem at any given time. So 5 over 30, if you want to, you can factor it out now, simplify it, and then you have 1 over 6 x is equal to 15. The reason we would do this right here, well, first of all, by simplifying the fraction, when we do the multiplication, we'll have lesser numbers to multiply by, and we'll have a less likely chance of needing to simplify our answer. So the coefficient now is 1 over 6. The reciprocal of that is 6 over 1. And on this side, 15 times 6. 6 times 6 is 1, leaving us with x. And 15 times 6 is, and you can do it this way if you like, 60 times 10, 6 times 10 is 60, 6 times 5 is 30, 60 and 30 make 90. Now some of the more challenging examples. Let's go with x over 7 is equal to 8. The first thing I always remind students is identify your coefficient. So this is x over 7, which means 1 over 7. Multiply by the reciprocal. Now you could have multiplied by 7 as the inverse, but I'm trying to show the consistency between all the examples right now. 7 over 7 is 1, leaving us with x, and the product of 8 and 7 is 56. We've got about 2 more. Negative m over 4 is equal to 12. So again, identify the coefficient. I'm going to give you 5 seconds. So hopefully you were saying to yourself negative 1/4, and that would be correct. So the inverse, multiplicative inverse of negative 1/4 is negative 4 over 1. And we're multiplying that negative 4 on both sides. That's 1. And then the product of 12 and negative 4 is negative 48. Something else I want to remind you about is be sure to read the directions. If it doesn't say to check your work, then you don't necessarily have to, but it's always good practice, especially if you're not sure about your solution. This is our last one. One last time, identify the coefficient of s over 6. I'm hoping you said 1 over 6 to yourself. Alright, what is the multiplicative inverse, or the reciprocal of 1 over 6? Again, successfully you were hopefully thinking 6 over 1, and then this side is 7 times 6. You'll notice that sometimes I'm using parentheses, sometimes I'm not. That's one of the cool things about math. You have different symbols meaning the same thing. So this is 6 over 6, so that's 1. That leaves us with s. And then the product of a negative 7 and a positive 6 is a negative 42. So there you go. Alright. Please practice this on your homework, show all your work, and if you need to, review the video later on. Bye-bye.